Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz, your host. Very pleased to be joined tonight by a guest who's been on here a number of times, an old friend of ours, George Curtis. He's a local Oshkosh attorney, and it's nice to have you back again.
Cheryl, thanks for inviting me.
We try to have you on once a year, usually toward the beginning of the year, and we wanted to do it a little bit earlier, but I was kind of booked up. But we like to talk about the new laws that have gone into effect for the new year. So, and you reached out to me. You got to me before I could get to you this time, so thank you for that. But it's always a pleasure. So what kinds of things have gone into effect as of January 1st when it comes to laws?
Actually, tons of things have been passed by our Wisconsin legislature during the last year, because if you are a Republican, it's the perfect world. You have a Republican Senate, you have a Republican secondary branch of the legislature, you have a Republican governor who will sign whatever gets passed, and so there isn't any effective resistance. The Republican Party has been able to serve those people that support it and those people that agree with it, and they've just ran through tons of legislation, some of it affecting most of us, and some of it very narrow legislation, like passing something that prohibits, for example, a county executive from also being in the legislature. That only is aimed at one person.
Of course, it's aimed at Mark Harris.
At Mark Harris.
A Democrat.
A Democrat. Everybody else in the legislature can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 7 jobs. There are doctors, there are lawyers, there are realtors, there are teachers. Yeah. But Mark Harris can't have 2 jobs. Now, that's just aimed at Mark Harris. They rammed through a constitutional amendment to change the way the Supreme Court of Wisconsin elects its chief. It had been that the person with the most seniority was automatically the chief, but the person with the most seniority now, Shirley Abramson, is a liberal, and they wanted to destroy her, so that they passed this legislation, and the voters voted on it, that said no, the chief is from now on elected by the other members of the court. And of course, with the swing being one more conservative than one more liberal, Shirley's no longer chief. But that wasn't enough. They now have legislation for a mandatory retirement at age 75. It only affects one jurist. That's Shirley Abramson.
She's kind of getting it every which way, isn't she?
It's perfectly okay that our federal judges are appointed for life and 3 more days. Yeah. And so they never get old, but our state judges apparently age quite a bit. So that that's kind of personal legislation, but that's not the only personal legislation. They got rid of the Government Accountability Board because those people were after clean government, and some of that splashed on the party in power. They passed a law that allows us to have John Does, which are really terrible inquests. They're secret, but it's now illegal to have a John Doe investigating political corruption. So you can't go after Walker like they did, and Walker's assistants, which they did.
Yep,
You can't. Politicians are now immune from John Does, but you and I aren't.
Yeah.
They can be a John Doe against us at any particular time. And then, of course, they've passed a whole lot of special interest immunities. We got more immunities for involving horses, involving aviation, involving equine therapy. I've got a whole list of special interests that got more immunities. Then that just means that people who are victimized by those particular groups can't successfully get their damages compensated. But just to remove all doubt which side they're on, whether it's the consumer or the insurance industries that insure the wrongdoers, they shortened the statute of limitations in wrongful death cases.
What is it now?
Well, it's now down to 2 years, and
Okay.
so if people are mourning, or there are other people seriously injured in the accident, and they let the 2 years slip, that's a short statute of limitation, the shortest one I've ever heard of.
You almost have to file litigation in those cases immediately.
Oh, exactly, but if you're in a coma, it's hard to do.
Yeah.
They shortened the statute of limitations in an underinsured motorist case. They shortened the statute of limitations in an uninsured motorist case. In an automobile accident that involves property damage, it's a shortened statute of limitations. They shortened the statute of limitations against a realtor that screws up your real estate transaction. And so they're protecting, or really they call it a reform. The reform is to take away the rights of the consumer and give them to the insurance companies that insure the wrongdoers.
They're protecting their own.
Of course they are. And really, is there anything necessarily wrong with that as long as we know about it? No. All of this is about special interest. And the other party has their special interest too.
Sure.
And their special interest is more likely to be supported by consumers and by teachers and by victims of torts, and the Republicans are more likely to be representing the interests of the medical industry and the insurance industry, and where they get their support. So it's all about special interest. There aren't any saints in this play. Right. But when you have one party in charge where they can be the judge and the jury, they slide through an awful lot of stuff. I mean, just one more example is they have quickly, without any real hearings and without any notice to the interested parties, rammed through something about commercial fishing and commercial fish farms. And as they have kind of tossed out the protections of the waters that belong to all of us, and so that there's an immunity, incidentally, for setting up cribs on stream beds that used to think they belonged to all of us. They can now use the public water for their fish farms, and they can put the waste back in the public water because they say, we've been wrong all along. This is really agriculture. But
and this is okay with the DNR?
Well, the DNR really didn't seem to know about it in advance, and one person showed up to protest, and they've been mugged and haven't had anything where they could say since, because the DNR is run by the Walker administration.
Yeah, that's true.
That goes all the way back to Tommy Thompson. I can't blame Walker for that. Tommy Thompson decided he wanted one more agency to run, and so he took over the DNR. Doyle promised if he was elected he would take it away from the governor's job and make it apolitical. Well, he had a problem with his memory after he got elected.
A lot of politicians do that. They all seem to suffer from that affliction.
Happen. So lots and lots of things have been taking place. I've just touched a few of them.
And, that's all under the Walker administration. by and large.
Definitely. If your concern is money for public education, under Walker, there's been a lot less of it. If, on the other hand, you favor vouchers for public money being taken away from the public schools and given to private schools, Walker's done that. He's benefited that. If you're interested in open government and freedom of information, he's tried to close those doors, and because of interference. If you're interested in full protection of the environment, those protections have been reduced a great deal under Walker. But I had a very nice man in my office today who's a realtor, and if he could find Walker, he would kiss Walker and hug him, because that's his special interest. Realtors for a long time have been troubled by our rather stringent protection of the environment, which means that it takes a long time to get a permit to build on what was partially a wetland. It takes a long time to get through the shoreline protections if you want to put a resort and have access to the water and things like that. Since Walker's been in, it's been easy. You simply remediate the wetland that took 3 million years to develop by buying twice as much land in a western county for $100 an acre, drag a ditch and a hose through it, and you've created a new wetland. You've duplicated 2 million years of Mother Nature in a matter of hours.
Isn't it amazing how well that works?
Well, science is fantastic. But so that, again, this is all special interest. I mean, this realtor, who's a client of mine, and I think a friend of mine, is quite sure I'm crazy that I'm bothered by that. You know.
Well, it comes down to, it's just like when people vote. So often they're a one issue voter, and this seems to be kind of more the same. He thinks the sun rises and sets on Walker because he's a realtor and he likes what they've done for realtors.
And I think the religion that Walker espouses is a religion that is anything for business. Now, while I think he's been absolutely devastating to labor and labor's rights, he doesn't see it that way. He says that anything we can do to make it easier for businesses to land here, to establish here, will ultimately trickle down to the workers, because we'll have more jobs.
That hasn't happened.
Well,
he's in his second term, and he's still trying to create the 250,000 jobs that he promised he would create in his first term.
And as a matter of fact, Wisconsin is behind the surrounding states in job creation. But at the same time, that is a theory that's been around for 100 years, the trickle-down theory.
Sure.
And there are people who believe it, and he's one of the people who does believe it. I mean, I honestly think that Walker is doing what the people who elected him wanted him to do.
Sure.
And I, frankly, give him credit for being open and admitting that's what he wants to do. He favors business, which means he's disfavoring consumers, labor, who are trying to fight for their piece of pie. He favors big business, which means that it kind of puts a squeeze on the middle class, the working people. Wages have not kept up. Labor's been weakened. Walker has a belief that this is what the state needs, and I think he's a capable person. I don't have his values,
right?
But I'm not calling him any names. I think he's fairly honest about it. This is what he's going to do. He's made very clear that in terms of the tort area, the area of law where I represent victims of bad products, bad driving, and fight insurance companies, that he's on the other side. He'll do anything to reduce the rights of the victims and the consumers at the benefit of the companies. This week's legislation is collateral source. This is a big item.
Collateral source.
Collateral source. What this is in a tort case, in a lawsuit of, take an auto accident, for example, if you make the claim against the insurance company of the individual who caused you the injury, under the law that we've had for many, many years in the state of Wisconsin, the collateral source rule, if you made the sacrifice and had the foresight to go and buy health insurance, and your health insurance paid some of these bills, maybe even got a discount about them, that is a collateral source that's to your benefit. You paid for this insurance, you own it, and the insurance company for the negligent driver who rear-ended you could not present to the jury evidence that you got money for those bills previously and how much the money was. That was the collateral source rule. It was to the benefit of the individual who made the sacrifice to buy the insurance. Well, they just kicked out the collateral source rule within the last week. Now, the wrongdoer gets the benefit of the insurance you bought. It reduces the amount of damages that you can collect from the guy who hit you. He gets the benefit, and his insurance company get the benefit of the sacrifice you made to protect your family to buy this insurance.
Which having insurance is now a requirement.
Yeah. So I think this is just terrible, but I've got an article here from a state legal organ that has one of my lawyer son's picture on the front page. He defends insurance companies. He says this levels the playing field. I got to get a hold of that kid.
How does he think it levels the playing field?
Well, of course, he makes a living off insurance companies.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, he's sniffing about the same
anything
stuff.
for the benefit of consumers or the little guy is falling by the wayside.
Oh,
if it hasn't already. They're just chipping away at it.
It's been kicked to the curb. Your insurance policy isn't worth half what it was 5 years ago, and you didn't get a reduced premium. You probably got an increased premium. And so we know why the insurance industry is very neck deep in election financing. And for that matter, one of the laws that got weakened was the election financing law.
Yeah.
No surprise there. But these pendulums of swinging the conservative side and swinging to the liberal side, they've gone on for 200 years that I know about, and that's as old as I admit to being. I'm sure they've been going on for a long time.
That's true. So you mentioned about equine therapy. And what was the change there with regard to that?
Well,
and the reason I'm asking is because I just had someone on the show a couple weeks ago who her organization is a nonprofit that does equine therapy. So does the change hurt the person or persons who have been injured doing equine therapy, or can you explain that a little bit more?
Well, frankly, I haven't seen the final bill. We had equine immunity already. The equine people must have a pretty good lobby, because if you were injured at a horse activity, in the past it's been very limited that you could file suit. That's been a defense. Now, the equine therapy part of it is just a new immunity, so the impression I got of what they were trying to accomplish, but I haven't seen the final as passed, was that if somebody's injured because they're receiving equine therapy, they can't file suit.
Oh, I see.
It's just another layer of immunity.
Okay.
You know, we've got skiers immunity, we've got school immunity, we've got recreational immunity, we've always had Good Samaritan. The immunity part of the statutes is increasing all the time. Anybody who's got a lobby can stroke enough legislators and and get some immunity. And so that just means one more group of people aren't responsible. Now, that isn't going to stop the insurance companies from selling you insurance.
That's right.
But they just aren't going to have to. They're selling you something that you can't possibly use. But you're required by law to have it.
Yeah, yeah. Anything else that is being looked at or considered right now by the legislature?
Oh,
that,
yes,
people need to know
there
about?
are more things I made.
Oh, wow.
They've weakened the workers' comp law. They've already.
Tell us about that one.
Well, our workers' comp law goes all the way back to 1911. It's been a model throughout a century. And it's to protect workers.
Sure.
And they have a system. It works. Now, admittedly, Wisconsin has not been a generous payer on workers' comp, but workers who are injured on the job, unlike when 100 years ago when this was a mill town and the sawyers and the other people would take 14-year-old kids until their fingers were cut off and then turn them loose for their families to support. It's been a model in terms of the presumptions being in favor of the worker, and even if the worker is somewhat negligent, they don't lose their workers' comp. They can get penalized a small amount. On the other side of that coin is if there was a violation of a safety law, for example, the lack of a guard on a saw, there could be a modest increase. But apparently, employers have convinced Walker and his group that the workers' comp law was leaning toward the workers, and so they watered down the strengths, and tried to streamline it so it doesn't have that built-in bias in favor of the workers, which is what it was designed to do.
That's the point of it.
That was exactly the point to do, yeah.
Okay, what else is on that list of yours?
Well, the dog bite statute. At one time when I was handling dog bites, you could get triple damages if this dog was a biter. That's why off camera I ask you about your Dalmatian. Some of them bite.
She doesn't.
Then,
Nor have I had one that did.
then the legislature reduced it to a double damage statute, that if you could prove there was a prior bite and the owner or the person in control of the dog knew of the prior bite, that you could get double damages because they were basically harboring a dangerous animal. Well, now the legislature watered that down again. Now you have to be able to prove not only the earlier bite, but that both bites were severe enough to leave scars, substantial scars. In other words, making a tough thing tougher. Frankly, I know you're involved in animals and you care about animals and you have rescue animals.
But they shouldn't be biting people.
Well, they shouldn't be biting
You know.
people, but very often people do the right thing for the right reason, but they get an animal that has been mistreated previously, and with people who don't know animals, and little kids come up and put their face on the animal's face or the animal's dish or something like that, they're going to be bitten. And I hate to say this, but often people don't tell the truth when they find a new home for their animal. They don't tell the truth or the shelter wouldn't take them. And so a lot of these animals have been abused and are dangerous, and their owners sometimes know about it and sometimes don't. And so dog bite in a state like this where almost everybody has pets is a real issue, and most of the bites are to the face of children. And so
and you know, and I will just say this, I think that parents need to take responsibility for their children, you know. Watch them if you have pets, you know. Don't let them pull the dog's tail or grab at their ears or, you know, bother them while they're eating, things like that. I know of a dog that was being fostered, and the owners, or the foster family, had the dog at a dog park. This didn't happen here, another place in the state. And someone else who was at the dog park said, you know, can our child pet the dog? She was told no. She let the kid go anyway, and the dog snapped. This is a small child. There was hardly a bite mark, much less a scar, but they sued. And the dog ended up having to be put down. Now, that's not the dog's fault. They were told not to go near the dog, and she did it. So sometimes I think, George, this is parents' stupidity or neglect of watching their kids or whatever. And, you know, if you pull a dog's ear or you yank on a dog's tail, it's probably going to snap at you. It's the only way it has to protect itself.
Well, you've touched on 2 points. One point is that today most parents don't think that they should raise their voice to their children, and they just let their children run the world. And when 4 or 5-year-olds do that, that is a problem. Most of the people who just get in the face of a dog are not allowed to have a dog at home, and so they don't have any training in what to do with a strange dog. So you're right, it's often a parent problem, and there are things that you teach young people that you don't do with a dog. You don't tease a dog, you don't confront a dog in a feeding situation, you don't get aggressive with a dog, you let the dog come to you. You know that, I know that, but unless parents have trained their 4 or 5-year-old kids, they don't. They're just so happy to see a dog that they put their arms around it, and of course the dog thinks something bad is happening and defends itself.
Sure. It's interesting that you said that it's becoming a little less stringent with dog bites, because I had heard just the opposite. I heard that, for example, if your dog bites someone, I heard that it's automatically quarantined and probably ordered to be put down. Is that not the case?
Well, first of all, it's not automatically quarantined. All you got to do is show that the dog had the shots.
Okay.
Secondly, I've had, I'm sure, 60 dog bite cases, and there is no relationship between a civil case for dog bite injuries and a dog being put down. That is a decision that is made by totally different people, normally the owners, and it's a separate procedure in the courts. What is confusing that question is that if your dog bites and you are insured with American Family, you'll be sued and so will American Family. And American Family will say, okay, now that we know your dog is a biter, we're canceling your insurance unless you show us with a statement from the buyer that you've gotten rid of this dog and the buyer has been told the dog is a biter. So if you want to save your insurance, you take that step. It's a whole different legal process prosecuted by authorities to have the dog put down. I've never seen one that was put down, but frankly, I've been given 4 or 5 dogs over the years because I'm not afraid of being bitten. I can show you how smart I'm not. And I didn't, these were clients of mine and friends of mine, and I said, I'll take the dog. I'm not worried about being bitten. And I got a neighbor who, one of these was, the most recent one was a beagle, and I got a neighbor who runs dumb bunnies with beagles, and I can probably find a home for it, and if not, and incidentally, the damn beagle bit me. But this whole idea that you got to put the dog down because it bit somebody is absolutely false.
If you have to go to a doctor or an emergency room, do they have to report that to the police as a dog bite?
Yes, I think there is
because I had heard that also.
There is a reporting requirement, but all the owner has to do is show that the dog had its shots. Now, if it doesn't have its shots, it's got to be quarantined for 5 days.
Sure. And if you're doing what responsible pet owners should be doing, the dog will have had its shots.
Of course.
You know,
yeah.
And you can't get a city license, certainly not in the city of Oshkosh, and I think this is probably true anywhere in the state. You can't get a license unless you show proof of rabies vaccination.
Yep.
So Okay, anything else? You got a long list there.
We've got a bunch of things like that. I think some of the legislation about voting rights, we're just plain crazy, just designed to discourage people from voting.
Like the voter ID bill.
Yeah, the voter ID
That just
bill.
went, I mean, when we voted just the other day, IDs had to be shown.
Sure. Well, I think it's a solution to no problem. There was no evidence of any real fraud. It was designed to discourage certain groups of people who are more likely to vote Democratic. People who are immigrants, people who are street people, people who move a lot, elderly people who don't drive, people on Social Security. The statistics tell us they're more likely to not vote Republican, and I think that was the motive for it.
Sure. And incidentally, the very few incidents of fraud, voter fraud, came on the Republican side. And ironically enough, it's the Republicans who pushed this through saying, oh, we got voter fraud, we got voter fraud.
Well, I think that nationally there's a concern because of the immigration issues that the Republicans are concerned that the non-native-born people are going to go with the other party. And so it's a strategy to minimize the number of those people who will vote. Now, if I was an immigrant with all of the propaganda of 15 million people going to be put on a truck and taken to Mexico, would I show up at a recent Wisconsin election? Would I show up and try to get ID? No, I'd stay away from the authorities. And
yes,
absolutely. I think that really was the strategy, and maybe it worked. I really don't know.
Well, you know, I personally don't have a problem showing an ID to vote, but it's disenfranchising to, as you said, a number of different kinds of groups of people. And, you know, you'll always hear people making the argument, George, that, well, we have to show an ID to get on a plane, we have to show an ID to do this and to do that. But those aren't constitutional rights. The right to vote is constitutionally given to us, and you're making it harder for certain groups of people to exercise their constitutional right. And therein is where I say the difference lies.
Well, I think that's a big difference. Of course, the rhetoric in our national presidential election is bringing out some haters and some angry statements that would frighten people, especially minorities. It's interesting that I think this week a whole lot of Latino people who are basically taking care of the cows in these big farms where the farmers can't get anybody else to do it. They're being paid, but nevertheless, they're going to take a day off to go to the legislature and express their concerns. We've got a kind of an anti-immigrant, anti-foreigner anxiety going on, and then when Trump says he's going to put them all in trucks, and then he's going to build a fence. His fence doesn't include Walker's fence, which is the one up in Canada.
Well, and we heard today what the Pope said about Trump. So,
so you know, it's a scary time to be a minority, and then.
It's a scary time to be an American. Let's
put it
that way.
I think
with
so.
Some of these candidates that are in the debates.
It's a bad time to be anybody but a white Anglo-Saxon member of a majority religion. It's not a liberal time.
No, it's not. I know that we're, kind of running short on some time. We've probably got about 20 minutes or so left, and there's some things I want to cover, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. issue, and you can't discuss a lot of this issue. But when you were here last time, we spoke about, your own legal battles with the IRS. And since you were here last time, you actually did 6 months in a federal prison for, what was it, tax fraud? What are they actually
No,
charging
it
you
wasn't tax
with?
fraud at all. They didn't accuse me of that. It was misdemeanor willful refusal to pay taxes. It was a year where I closed a real estate transaction and the IRS agent picked up 167 grand, which was enough to pay that year twice. But I found out when I went to trial, they didn't apply it that year. They applied it another time, another place without telling me, which is, I guess they're right, because I wasn't smart enough to say it goes for this year or it goes for that year. So that, I served 6 months. Actually, they did a little diesel therapy and I served it in 5 different places. But I spent most of the time at a camp where I was able to teach 3 courses. I was able to take 3 courses, I was able to read 30 books, and I was able to work out. So I didn't really waste that time, and I didn't have a bad time. It was a very tough time on my family and on my law office employees. Many of them had to seek work elsewhere simply because I was only able to pay them for half hours, and some of them simply couldn't afford it. But I sued the IRS, and that lawsuit is pending. And so the fight continues, but now it's in the civil arena. In about 2 weeks, I give a deposition, and I suspect I will be fighting this the rest of my life. And I hope that's a good long time, but my next birthday I'll be 80, so maybe it won't be that long.
Wow. Well, you don't seem to be 80 years old.
I don't feel 80 years old. As a matter of fact, losing 50 pounds and working out every day, I feel 10 years younger than when I went in.
So it was a good thing.
Well, you make
in some respects.
you make lemonade, and I will say this: my wife and I take every opportunity to spend time together and enjoy each other. My staff has a dinner at this very moment at Fratello's, and they meet every month because it brought them closer together. My clients have been wonderful, my family's been wonderful, and I've learned about what's important. And this wouldn't happen if I was paying attention, so I'll take some blame myself. All we can do is change from here on. We can't change yesterday.
So the criminal aspect of this case is finished.
Well,
as far as
they
from
convinced,
their standpoint.
Yeah, from
you're not facing more prison time at some point.
No,
right?
I'm not charged with any crimes.
Okay, and you're suing them, and so that's an ongoing thing that you can't really discuss. I've always appreciated, George, your forthrightness and your honesty about things. You could have simply said to me, I don't want to talk about this. But you've put it out there. No. I know would have preferred probably not to discuss
I don't want to talk about it. I didn't know I had that option.
We'll rewind the whole thing, right?
Okay.
No, but that's one of the things I've always admired about you is you take your knocks when you've got them coming. You're honest and forthright about things, and whether someone's right or wrong, honesty always is the best policy.
And the feds have their job to do. Their job is to keep the prisons full. It's the most expensive government waste, not only in this country, but in the entire world. We have a higher percentage of people locked up. We are spending more money per prisoner. We keep them to advanced ages. We have the longest prison terms. We spend more money on prisons than we do on education, and the public is brainwashed into thinking that the more severe the length of the sentence, the safer society is, when every study shows the opposite. The longer people spend in prison, the less equipped they are when they get out to be productive, and it's a higher percentage, the longer the sentence, the higher percentage of recidivism, because they find if they've been taken out of society for 10, 15 years, when they get out, what are they equipped to do? I taught prisoners who were being released how to do resumes. I could use some help. How do you explain the last 13 years where there's a gap in your resume? The prison doesn't teach them anything that equips them from when they get out to compete, to be ready, to have a skill. They're just storing people. And a public that has the illusion that the longer you lock them up, the safer society is, just have it upside down, inside out, and backwards.
Well, you know, if we want to help reform the inmates, then you're right. We have to help get them on the right path so that when they do serve their time and they come out, they can at least work toward becoming productive members of society.
And in the meantime, we're paying $160,000 a year for the prisoner, and we're paying for his spouse on the outside and his children. So we're paying 3 generations, and the people who are milking the system are the wardens and the officers and that sort of thing. The various retirement programs they have would shock almost any citizen. That's something that should be checked into. It really is the biggest waste going on in our country, and it's a waste of lives. In my short stint, I met a lot of great people. Many of them were prisoners. I can think of one guy who was serving 24 years for selling marijuana. I met a lot of great people who were guards. And if they got into the system early enough, they were going to be able to retire in their 40s, making just tons of taxpayers' money. It is a wasteful system, and it is not working.
Right. What do they call that? The industrial prison complex or something like that?
Oh, sure. Well, I taught 3 courses with a law degree, and I made 12 cents an hour. I worked 40-some hours a week, but they only paid me for 3 hours a week.
You need to contact Scott Walker, our wonderful governor, about those labor issues. Should have started a union in the prison.
and I wasn't allowed to practice law, and I wasn't allowed to contact my office, but I was hounded constantly because people knew I was a lawyer. And then they wanted to get me in trouble, and I could get in trouble for practicing law, and so the warden called me in and said, "You aren't practicing law, are you?" And I said, "You damn right I am." "Really? What are you doing?" I said, "All these cops are coming for free legal advice. What am I supposed to do?"
Tell me about the facility you were in. It was a white-collar type?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, actually where I ended up after they gave me 2-3 weeks of diesel therapy was a former woman's prison in Pekin. It was absolutely beautiful. It had 10,000 flowers. It had 2 barracks. One of the barracks was the drug unit. That's what the cops called it. And that were largely white-collar crime of people who had the money to take advantage of Obama's recent legislation that if you could prove that your sentence had something to do with drugs or alcohol and you took this silly course, you got a percentage of your sentence reduced. So we had all of those folks in that barracks. The other one was referred to as the ghetto by the cops. I was in the ghetto because I didn't qualify for the drug stuff, and I was only in for 6 months anyway. The ghetto, sadly, was about 85% black minority people, many of them Muslims. I got to be friends with most of them who never really had a chance. Many of them were carrying bullets. I got to be good friends with them. I helped them as much as I could. Most of them were raised in households where they didn't have a father, single-family households. Most of them did not have an education. Most of them lived off the streets. and most of them were used by real criminals to do the dirty work, to deliver a drug or something like that, and most of them had outrageous sentences. They weren't properly represented when they were in the court system. My cellmate had already had 13 years in. The guy who was released the day I was had served 14, 15 years, and he had 9 years of supervision coming. I really felt sorry for those people. The system did not at all deal with the cause of crime, and they were just put away, nothing done for them, not really protected, never had a chance.
Well, and of course, through all of this, when you came out, you're now in a different location than what
Yes.
you were before. Where are you at now?
Well, we're out on Highway 21. The very great landlord that I had on Washburn had a chance to lease out a lot of the building for a lot more money than I was able to pay, because I'm kind of starting over in some ways. So we made a gentleman's agreement. He's renting that out to a medical group that's moving in, and he helped me find another place. Instead of paying 16 grand a month, I'm paying 4 grand, and I'm grateful. But he did have a great place. I loved being there, but I simply couldn't afford it coming out and starting.
So how long have you been on 21?
A couple of months.
Okay.
It's working out well. I
So
think we moved
the
in
big
November.
George Curtis sign by Cumulus Radio, that'll be coming down sometime.
Well,
soon,
it's coming down, but I'm trying to figure out a nice place to put it. Where
Well, see if you can't put it on Highway 21. And you're rebuilding your website.
Yes.
So now the website address is oshkoshlaw.com, or
Frankly, I haven't seen it. So I
you don't know?
So I
Okay,
don't
all right. I think that's what it was, but it is under construction.
Yes, it
so
is, yeah.
we can't really refer anyone to that. But your number is...
Four numbers are the same, 233-1010,
Yep.
and I am so delighted that I had 6 mediations this week. My clients have been so loyal, and I still go to work at 5 in the morning because I have to.
You mentioned earlier about inadequate representation, and I think that's a good segue to get into Making a Murderer, the Netflix series, a 10-part series, 10-hour series on the Stephen Avery case, and I'm sure that everybody who's watching this is familiar with what that case is. And I have to say that, you know, before I saw the series, I personally thought he was guilty. I thought his nephew was guilty of this horrible rape and murder and whatever else happened to this young freelance photographer back in 2005, October 31st of 2005. When I watched the series, there's definitely some problems, I feel, with the evidence that was presented. And, you know, I think people just need to watch it if they haven't already. But everyone in the country seems to be talking about this. What are your thoughts about this series?
Okay, first of all, I haven't seen the series. I know enough about criminal law to be dangerous because I was a criminal lawyer for about 25 years. I actually defended a half-dozen murder cases and many other crimes. I've worked with cops. I actually have been a prosecutor appointed by the Attorney General of the state because of a crooked cop. I know there are crooked cops. I know that Avery got screwed the first time. I know it goes on. Now, am I saying that all cops are crooked? No. Probably 1 out of 100. But it only takes 1.
Yeah.
I know some of the lawyers involved in this case, and I have strong opinions. I don't know how the prosecutor was portrayed, but he is a kind of an arrogant SOB. And I've dealt with him
Ken
in my
Kratz.
Yeah, I dealt with him. I know that Ray Edelstein and the fellow who worked with him, who is now in Madison but was formerly here.
Mark Fremgen.
Right.
Yep.
They're capable people, and they're conscientious. They're representing their clients. I know Lenny Kaczynski. He's a professional, and I think he had a difficult job because I think his client had already confessed before he got into it. He apparently made the judgment that the best he could do for his client was have his client testify against the other guy and get a reduced sentence. That's a common thing. I don't like it, you don't like it, but a criminal defense lawyer has to play the cards he has, even if he's only got that card. And so I think there were a lot of factors involved, but I understand from you and from other people who've seen the series, there's some real questions raised about the evidence. And I have, back when I was doing a regular diet of criminal work, I bumped into cops who were just crooks with badges. And so I think it's a discussion that should be had, and we know that Avery got screwed the first time.
Yes.
And he maybe did it again.
Well, and you know, this would be a non-issue if the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, who had been sued for $32 million, I believe, by Stephen Avery, because he had been incarcerated for 18 years for a crime he did not commit. Maybe it was 36 million, I don't know, but he sued them for lots and lots of money. And, you know, people believe that this was just sort of retaliation and that he was sort of set up. I don't know who killed Teresa Halbach. I don't believe that the police necessarily killed her, but I'm not entirely convinced that he did it. If the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department had stayed out of it like they were ordered to do, none of this would have been an issue, you know? But they came in 4 months after the original search had been done. They went back in, they found things that no other law agency had found. Now, how is this possible? 4 months after. And things with, like her key ring, her key and the lanyard that it was on. People use keys, they pick up their keys. How many times a day, George, do you pick up your keys, you know, for your car and your home? Her DNA wasn't even found on the key or the lanyard that they found in his, that they claimed to have found in his bedroom.
We have forgotten the presumption of innocence, and it should be the trump card. The value judgment of our system, and we've gotten away from it, is it's far more important that we never convict somebody who might be innocent than it is that we convict somebody who is probably guilty, but maybe not. What is the loss if somebody gets out of a conviction? If people think, because they don't know, that they're getting out scot-free, not so. The pressure of being accused, the pressure on their family, the pressure on their economics, the money, the impact on their reputation, because there are many people who are going to think they're guilty even if they're found not guilty. Their lives are largely destroyed even when they're not found guilty. They don't get away scot-free. But we've forgotten that presumption and that value judgment that this country was founded on.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he did kill her, and the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department just wanted to make sure that they had enough so-called evidence to put him away. So maybe some things did turn up in places where they shouldn't.
The case that I was special prosecutor on that was over in Marquette County was planted evidence, where that's exactly what you said. Probably the man was guilty, but they weren't sure they could do it, so they planted the evidence just to seal the deal.
Yeah, and that's just not right. That's, you know, if there's not enough evidence to get a conviction, then that's the system that we have.
And
you can't just plant evidence.
Sure, and the person who did it or maybe did it still spends the rest of his or her life looking over their shoulder, wondering if they're going to be picked up tomorrow.
Yeah. We're down to like 5 minutes, and I want to talk about a couple of things just real quick. Do you still have your It's Your Environment show? I
do.
Okay. That's something that you've been on the air just a couple years longer than I have. Didn't you start that like in what year?
I think it's been about 10 years, but I really don't know. I don't know. 2001.
Okay. Is what my notes showed. So you started about a year before I did, and but you know it's shown here on Channel 2, Cable Access Channel 2. Can people find it on YouTube as well, or no?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And we're going to do one in about a week about Rush Lake, because the Ducks Unlimited just added 178 acres of the old Two's farm on Rush Lake, and I've participated in about 1,000 acres in that area that at one time or another I owned. And I'm not claiming I gave it away, but I sold it for less than it was worth, and so it's in an easement, or the federal government has it, or the state government has it, or it's in glacial habitat. And so that is really a wildlife haven over there, and we want to do a show as soon as we can get out in the snow.
Okay, so they just look up It's Your Environment on YouTube?
Sure. Right.
And what about your law show? Do you still have that?
We do. We did
It's
one.
Your Law, is that what it's called?
Yeah, we did one last week. Mike Coborn and I were on, and I've got one coming up with Jack Kelly in about a week.
Okay, good. And that's also here on Channel 2
Right.
and I'm assuming on YouTube?
Right.
All right. And something, I mean, you're a great environmentalist, and I just wanted to, you were given the first ever Catherine D. Rill Environmental Award from the Winnebago Audubon Society back in 2008, 8 years ago. And have you gotten it since, or just that one time?
I think one time. But I was pleased, and I was flattered by it. I have probably effectively made sure at least 1,500 acres are in some form of public easement or ownership where we can't build apartment houses and things like that on. That's going to be kept for the wildlife. I had 940s up in Rusk County that are in kind of a forest crop easement, and I had some land in Lincoln County and Langlade County, and around here it's largely been in the Rush Lake area because we live out there.
Sure. Well, thank God for people like you, George, because, you know, we need to do everything we can to protect our environment. You know, whether that's something as simple as using, you know, the environmentally friendly light bulbs, or it's going totally green. You know, every little bit counts and every little bit helps.
This is the only environment we're going to get, and it's been going the wrong direction for 200 years, especially in an industrial area like the Fox Valley, where the industrialists, especially the paper companies, thought that it was a public sewer.
Yeah.
And we may never get all the poisons out of Green Bay. It's dead.
Yeah.
So that it's important that we start now.
Yeah. All right. So we're just about out of time here. Do you have any closing thoughts at all?
Well, yes. Be alert, vigilant. As long as the legislature is in session, we are not safe. But the people who are in there, even if I didn't vote for them, really think they're doing the right thing, and you just have to get a hold of them and talk to them, and they will listen. I'm kind of a liberal, but Senator Ellis was, I think, the greatest senator we ever had, because he's a smart guy and he'll listen to you. And we've got other people. Don't assume because the people disagree with you that they're bad and you're good. There's a reason for why they think, and they might listen to why you think differently.
So get a hold of people and state your opinion. That's going to do it for us. Thank you, George, so much.
My pleasure,
I always
Cheryl.
enjoy having you on.
I enjoy being here.
Thanks to George, thanks to you, thanks to the crew, and we will see you next time. Until then, take care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.